On today's show, we interview Perry Husband. We talk hitting, pitching, EV, effective velocity.
Welcome to another episode of the Baseball Awakening Podcast, where we dive into the raw, unfiltered, unsexy side of player development. Get ready for some knowledge bombs with your host, Geoff Rottmayer.
Welcome to the Baseball Awakening Podcast. I am Geoff Rottmayer, and today we are sitting here with Perry Husband with hittingatheguest.com. Again, that is hittingatheguest.com. Perry has a very long bio, but I'm going to shorten it up. Mr. Husband is a pioneer in the world of baseball science as he introduced many of the modern hitting metrics to include exit velocity and launch angles. Perry also discovered through the discovery of effective velocity, there were many pitching breakthroughs to include the EV tunnel, location adjusted speed, and many others. Perry also had written a handful of books and designed a handful of programs, which can be found on hittingatheguest.com. So with all that, Mr. Perry Husband, how are you, sir?
I'm good.
I'm excited to have you on, and you, sir, are a pioneer in the world of baseball science. You've introduced a lot of the metrics that we use in today's game, such as exit velocity, launch angle, effective velocity, tunneling, and stuff like that. So why don't you kind of tell our listeners in a nutshell, if someone were to ask you what you do, how would you define what you do?
I would think at the most core level, I'm a baseball instructor. That's how it all started, was with me I had a little baseball school, and in doing lessons and clinics and testing, I started making all these weird aha moments. Because when you look at hitting the way I look at it, and that is, I wanted to find out, like everybody else, what the best mechanics were. And the best mechanics needed to be tested. So that's why I started with the exit velocity. And we got Jay Bell, who was a 17-year big leaguer at the time and was with the Diamondbacks, but he was my roommate in minor league baseball. And I got him to do a video with us, which was just kind of a before and after. We tested his swing, put it on film with exit velocity, and then we also added an element of seeing how close to perfect he could make contact both off the tee and in live. And so when you start looking at it that closely, we put a target 50 feet away. So if you could just picture the back of a cage, we had a target set up to where if you hit it perfect, it was a small little area about the size of the strike zone, but at 50 feet away, that's pretty minute. And so his job was to try to hit it perfect in the middle. And we measured that. We looked at the exit speed, how hard it was coming off the bat. We looked at how far right or left, how far up or down. So the launch angle was something that was built into the target. And when we started looking at it super closely, there was just all these questions that started coming up. Was, if it's that hard to hit a ball sitting on a tee that a Major League Baseball player has trouble hitting more than 3 out of, in fact, it was actually 1 out of 10 was perfect. And that was what I had found in all my working with kids, was that it's just not easy to hit a ball perfect, even off the tee. So we started looking at live stuff at that point and thinking, if it's that hard off the tee, it's got to be ridiculously hard when guys are throwing 95 miles an hour with sink and cut and all the different ways that the ball can move. It's got to be a nightmare. So the more I started looking into it, the more things started not to make sense. In other words, I didn't think that hitters could actually do all the things that the top hitting instructors were talking about. Get your foot down early, let the ball travel, and it just didn't seem like there was that much time to be able to have all that take place and still be 100% on time. So that's when I really started looking at the pitching side of it, was through testing to find out what hitters could and couldn't do. And that list was pretty long, actually. So I guess to answer your question, I'm a baseball instructor that made some weird discoveries about pitch speeds and kind of had to take it to the next level in order to let the rest of the world know about what was really going on with the interaction between a pitcher and a hitter.
Nice. And why, in your mind, what was the idea behind wanting to know what one active velocity is?
Well, I was always a small player as a player, and it always bothered me because I knew I hit the ball harder than most people around me. But as long as you're small, in my era, I played at Cal State Northridge in 2000. Or actually, I'm sorry, 2000. In 1984, we won the national championship, and up until that moment, up until the College World Series, I had no idea that I would ever get drafted, even though I really felt like I was one of the better players around. Because I was small. And that time, if you're not 6'4", you're not getting drafted. And it was simple as that. And that always bothered me. It was a little bit on the Moneyball side. Like, I want to prove that there are guys pound for pound that are much better players than the guys you're drafting just because they fit the mold. And so that was part of it, was to kind of start proving that some of the players that I was working with were actually really good, even though they didn't fit that mold. But also, it was a way to quantify. I mean, that kid right there is making swings that I've worked with them on, and they would go to another coach, and the coach would tell him, "Oh, son, you can't hit with that swing here." And in my mind, I'm like, "What are you talking about? That kid's better than anybody you have on your club, and let's measure it and find out." And that's kind of where that started, was kind of a way to end arguments. Because when you talk about hitting, you open up a huge can of worms. Even in today's technology, with the ability to test everything, there's still arguments about what the best mechanics are.
Oh yeah, man, it's crazy. I don't get it, but you know what? That's another conversation for another time. So with the idea of trying to hit the ball 100% on time off a tee,
mm-hmm.
what was, when that thought process came up? Were you trying to find the right mechanics, or were you trying to see what was the goal? What were you trying to improve?
Yeah, it was mechanical at first, for sure. It was what mechanics are going to create the very best contact. And that means the hardest contact, that means the most consistent contact, that means the best launch angle. And so what is it that causes that? And it was mechanically based, for sure. I spent about 4.5 or 5 years as a golf pro after I got out of after the minor leagues. I taught golf for about almost 5 years. And I really learned to hit after I learned how to hit a golf ball, because it's so precise. And I realized that baseball is so imprecise. And that was one of the reasons why everything that I did was based around measuring, was based around, well, let's find out, if you think that mechanic is the best one, then let's test it and find out. And what I kept finding over and over and over again was, well, no, it's not. That's not the best method, because it doesn't produce as much exit velocity. And when you squish the bug when you spin on your back foot and squish the bug, you lose somewhere between 3 and 11 miles an hour of exit speed. And there's still players in the big leagues that do that. And when you look at their statistics, they will take a fastball right down central and foul it off about 50% of the time, which is one of those things that happens with that mechanic. It also lets them get underneath the ball, and so they tend to hit weaker ground balls, and they do hit a lot of homers, but when they mishit it slightly, it results in one of those foul tips or a ball that's hit weakly. So it was definitely mechanical based, but I soon found out that there was a lot more to it than just the mechanic side of it.
Sure, and I'm going to get into that because I got a lot of questions on that front. But let me ask, it's interesting that golf, what was the biggest takeaway from golf that you tried? Because one of the questions I was going to ask was, what made you try different things? And you kind of answered that with golf. So what was the biggest thing that you saw with the golf that you tried with the baseball swing?
Well, in the golf swing, if you're 1 degree off, if your club face is 1 degree off at impact, you're a long ways away, right or left. You simply can't play if you can't get the club back to pretty much square. I mean, within 1 degree, you're pretty good, but the second you get to 2 or 3 degrees away from perfect contact, you can no longer play this game at a high level because you're going to be spraying the ball all over the yard. So the precision of it was something that fascinated me when I was learning. Even when I was playing, when I was still playing, I was my brother owned some golf courses in Southern California, and I worked. That's where I worked at during college. So every time I picked up a club, I was getting a lesson. So I learned the game really quickly, and so I would hit balls practice a lot, even when I was playing in college. And during that time, I started making some realizations about how incredibly difficult it is to hit a ball pure with a golf swing. And then I started to kind of think about it a little bit as far as baseball was concerned, but I didn't really put it all together until after my baseball career was kind of over and I started teaching. And when I started teaching, then I started realizing how many huge correlations there are. When you learn how to hit a golf ball a long ways, you have to stretch all the right rubber bands in your body, and the ball's just sitting there, right? So it's all you. And so everything good or bad that happens is you. And so you realize that you have to, if you want to hit the ball 300 yards, you better do a lot of things exactly right. And so every movement is pretty precise. And in golf, they don't argue too much. I mean, there's some peripheral things, but by and large, a long time ago, they agreed that you need to release off your backside. You need to stretch your lead arm and lock it out in order to maximize the ability to repeat your move and to be able to stretch all the right rubber bands. So everybody does that. Not one player doesn't do that. And that's the one thing about golf that fascinated me was they measure it and then they do it. And in baseball, there's so many different swings in the game. It's actually less so now than it was back when I was playing, but there's still huge arguments about mechanical issues. But the reason is because nobody's actually ever tested anything to the nth degree like we have. We're not out there in a big way just yet. I think it's just a matter of time, but the mechanical side of hitting is really, in my opinion, there's a lot of myths out there. There are a lot of things that if you just test them, you're going to find that philosophy does not hold water. It doesn't test out. You can't hit it as consistent. You're not going to hit it as hard. And so that's kind of that's the basis of the correlation. But in golf, it's like this may actually help you a lot. I don't know if you've ever played golf, but you got a ball sitting there, and it doesn't move for the most part. It just sits there, and you load up and you make your best move at it. And if you're really, really good, you hit it. I think Jack Nicklaus said in a round of 69, he would average 6 perfect shots, 6 shots that he felt like he absolutely hit perfectly pure. But all the rest are misses, right? And so it becomes the understanding is that the better your swing is, the better I miss the ball. And even though I might hit that at 98% of my purest contact, that's not 100%. And that might be good enough. And that's where we've gotten to in baseball. Okay. Is that it's good enough. It's good enough to get me there. It's good enough to get me that contract. So why would I ever change it? There are guys in the big leagues that might hit 100 homers if they knew if they really made some adjustments, but we'll get into that in a second. But now picture the golf ball in the middle of my backswing. Somebody moves the ball, right? And they move it closer to me and they move it higher by 6 inches, let's say. So in the middle of my swing, all of a sudden now I have a new contact point. And now I'm going to have to adjust my swing in order to get the club face to that new location. So I'm going to lose power. I'm going to not swing at it as hard because now I'm adjusting my swing. And it's very unlikely that I'm going to hit it all that solid because now everything's changed, right? That's what hitting a baseball is like, is you load up just like in golf, but now here comes the ball and we don't know where it's going yet. We don't know how fast, we don't know in what area. And so we have to wait to see what pitch it is. And when we see what pitch it is, now we have a split second to readjust the swing in order to try to hit it. And that's what the philosophy is. That's the philosophy all around the internet. If you listen to guys talk, I've had a lot of discussions on Twitter or whatever, and that's their basic philosophy is see the ball away and adjust in. In other words, look to try to hit the ball to right field if you're a right-handed hitter. And then when the ball's inside, you just adjust your swing to hit it. But the problem with that is that you're only at about 70 or 75% of your max when you do that. So if you look at JD Martinez, every time he brings his hands in and adjusts to an inside fastball, he averages about 87 miles an hour of exit velocity in there, which is only about 75 or 77% of his max. Aaron Judge is the same. He's 75% of his max when he draws his hands in to hit an inside fastball. So regardless of what anybody says, yes, you can hit it, but there is a number that says what's perfect. And 75% isn't anywhere near, right? For most mortals, that's not even a homer. You can't even hit a homer. At 87 doesn't leave the yard. So if everybody threw JD Martinez nothing but fastballs in, and he kept the same approach, he wouldn't, obviously he would adjust, but if he kept the same approach, he would have a very difficult time hitting a ball over 75% of his max. So that philosophy doesn't really work. And the only reason it works at all, because obviously it works for JD Martinez, is that pitching is still in the Stone Age when it comes to understanding what they're doing. They're throwing a lot of balls in the same area that matches what JD Martinez's thought process is. So if you could picture JD with the ball on the tee, pitchers are throwing a lot of pitches that match his perfect spot on the tee, if that makes any sense. So they're throwing pitches that are going in the same angle as his bat. So when a fastball heading down at the bottom of the zone is somewhere between 7 and 12 degrees downward, and the slider is going to be a little more than that downward, and the curveball more than that. And so if you just swing the bat that's somewhere between 8 and 14 degrees, you're going to get a lot of pitches in the big leagues that match your swing plane. And that's why mechanics can work. Different mechanical ideas can work because there's so many possibilities of the way pitchers are going to pitch you. I mean, it's okay if you're at 75% of that pitch, if nobody throws that pitch to you, right? Who cares? If I'm only going to get that 1 in 10, who cares? I'm going to focus on the area that makes the most sense. And that's what's going on in Major League Baseball right now. there's a lot of guys whose careers have been made based on really bad pitching philosophy. That's going to change pretty soon, though. Trust me. That part of it is going to come out really soon. The idea that pitchers are still in the dark when it comes to the way they go about their business. But that's why mechanical inefficiencies can survive, is because the world of baseball, the guy that's attacking them doesn't know their weakness. They pitch to their strengths instead of to their opponent's obvious weakness. It's actually not that obvious unless you look at it like I do. It's really kind of hard to see, because you look at JD Martinez, you think that guy is awesome, right? There's nothing he can't do. He can hit every pitch. He hits fastballs. He hits curveballs. He hits sliders, and all of that's true. But he doesn't hit all of those in places that would, if you were an EV, if you were a black belt in effective velocity, you wouldn't throw pitches that are anywhere near where it's going to match his bat path or the speed that he's prepared to hit. But right now, that's the way pitchers go about it, is they don't look at it through the right lens, in my opinion.
Receive a Baseball Awakening decal by subscribing on iTunes and leaving an objective review. To claim your decals, screenshot the review and email it to Geoff@baseballawakening.com. That's GEOFF@baseballawakening.com, and we'll get that your way.
I like how you explain the concept of a ball on a tee and imagine it moving and having to make an adjustment. So, I mean, I think that's a great visual, and I can see how you're looking at it. So with that approach, looking away and looking in, we're now talking about looking for a certain pitch at a certain speed. Would that be correct?
Yep. Well, every hitter does that, whether they know that or not. And when you test players like I have, the Boston Red Sox hitting coach is Tim Hires. He and I, about 20 some years ago, I think it was 2003. I'll have to look that date up. But we did a test. He was running at that time a huge facility in Georgia. And right near, it was about 10 minutes away from the Perfect Game event that happens in East Cobb, where literally every kid in America that's a high school age player goes through this tournament. It's a huge showcase thing for Perfect Game. And we took 192 players and we tested them at his facility. We tested them off the tee for exit velocity, actually bat speed, ball speed, and we did a live test, reactionary test. And Tim actually ran the live reactionary test, and it was so telling. It was one of those pitching machines, if you can imagine, that where you see the big video and you see the pitcher's motion, and then the ball comes out of this hole where his hand goes to, right? And the pitching machine was really precise, so you could program it to throw it wherever you wanted to. And we were going to use 90 miles an hour, but the more we started thinking about it, we actually went down to 70 miles an hour. So we chose 70 miles an hour, like a batting practice speed pitch. And we set the players up to where they had 8 swings in the first round. And then we had 8 swings that counted. And what ended up happening was we used effective velocity. In the warm-ups, we went middle and middle away. So we set the tee in their mind and the speed in their mind to kind of an away fastball, which is what the world does right now. And so they hit the ball pretty well in the warm-up round. But then when we went to the live round, the one that counted, we went fastball middle in, fastball up and in, fastball down and away, fastball middle in, fastball down and away, fastball up and in. And so the reactionary times were very different, even though the speed of the pitch didn't change at all. Every pitch was within 1 mile an hour of 70. And the locations were in the strike zone. They weren't outside the strike zone jamming people, in that way. They just were in the strike zone, but in those different boxes. There's 9 boxes, right? So we used the ones that made sense from an EV perspective. And the average player, and these are elite perfect game players, right? These are elite high school hitters. The average was a 187 hard hit ball rate on 70 mile an hour BP pitches. And that was astounding when you really think about that. That's an astounding discovery, that all you have to do is move the ball around strategically in the zone, and you get players off the barrel that easily. Now, obviously, there were a few players that squared up a couple more balls than some of the others, but the average was 1.5 out of 8. Think about that. I mean, that's a crazy number. And they broke every bat we had. We made them use wood bats, and every one of the bats we had, I think we had 13 or 14 bats. Every one of them that they were using were shattered with 70 miles an hour. So what that shows is that guys are not nearly as good at reacting to pitches as they think they are. And so when pitchers understand that, and they begin to, the analogy of the tee is actually pretty good. If a hitter walks up to the plate and he wants to hit a pitch, he's ready to hit some pitch. He just doesn't know which pitch it is exactly. But through my research, what I found was that the hitter walks up to an outside fastball speed. That's the general first thing that happens when they get into the box. So when you throw pitches, let's just say you're facing a guy like, it doesn't really matter if whoever throws 93, the outside fastball speed's about 90. So when the hitter faces a guy that throws 93, he's going to take his best swings at 90 EV miles an hour. When you look back at the homer totals and you look at the location of the pitch and the speed of it, almost all the homers happen at right around that speed because that's the speed that they're the most geared to. That's where their tee is. Their mental tee is placed. Okay. So now any pitch that matches that speed, like a slider at 85, but it's middle in, right? The guy hangs it a little bit and it's middle in. It's not because he hangs it that makes the guy hit it. It's because it's the speed matches that outside fastball. So in other words, he could close his eyes and swing at an outside fastball and run into the slider that's inside because that's where his bat is going to be when that slower slider shows up. It's going to be right where his bat was or would be when he makes a full swing at outside fastball. So there's a lot of contact points that could actually run into that bat. So if you had a robot and you could teach that robot to focus at 90 miles an hour, his swing at 90 EV miles an hour, and then you took a typical major league pitcher up there, everybody that threw around 93, they would find it very difficult to miss bats if they did what they do every day. If they threw fastballs, sliders, changeups, and curveballs, they would have a tough time missing that robot's bat. And I know that sounds crazy, but if they just threw fastballs down and away and missed in the normal ways that they miss, and they threw sliders away and curveballs away and changeups away like they do in the big leagues, when you see that, you would be shocked how often that barrel would run into pitches. And that, even though it's not very popular, is exactly what's going on every night in Major League Baseball. Because the second that scenario changes, every hitter's terrible. If I were wrong, then they would hit in all kinds of circumstances. But when you look at, like, for example, last year, Carlos Pena went on and we did a prediction of EV that before he went on MLB Now, and he made a prediction that the hard hit balls in this postseason are going to happen exactly like this. 50% of them are going to happen within 6 miles an hour of the last pitch, EV miles an hour, which is basically what we just described, right? that means that you threw that slider at 85 in and the fastball away. And so the speeds are really close. Or you threw two fastballs in a row that were in the same area, or, whatever. Anything within 6 EV miles an hour makes up for about 50% of all hard hit balls. And then 20% of the balls that are going to be hit hard are going to be because there's no tunnel. And then 20% are going to be because you throw it in exactly the speed range that the hitter's the most prepared for, which is that outside fastball speed. And then 10% of those hard hit balls are going to be earned. They're going to be when a pitcher is actually using EV concepts and they're using tunnels and the pitches are more than 6 miles an hour apart. When that happens, only 10% of hard contact happens at the major league level. And I've done 1,000 studies if I've done one, and they're all exactly the same. And that's how I know that what went on in that test that Tim and I did way back when is the same thing that's going on in every big league game every night. Guys are going up to the plate and they're expecting a pitch in a certain area and they're gearing for that pitch. And a lot of other pitches are in that vicinity, in that neighborhood that they swing the bat at. And the second that goes away, and it went away this year in the postseason, you saw it. You saw the Dodgers offense went south because people started elevating fastballs. And now that launch angle swing doesn't work because you can't hit a flat fastball with a swing plane that's going up at 18 degrees. It's just not going to happen. And so that's what I'm talking about, is when pitchers begin to really understand effective velocity, the mammoth seasons that guys are having offensively is going to go away. A really good batting average is going to be very much lower than it is now, because you can't. It's the human animal, the person that's standing in there swinging the bat. It takes too long to swing the bat. In other words, when a guy's throwing 93 plus, and everybody is, that's the average major league speed now. So when you're talking about 95 mile an hour fastballs on average, there is zero chance that you can stand in there like these kids did in that test. They couldn't do it at 70. Big leaguers can't do it at 95. You can't wait to see what the pitch is and get around on a 95 mile an hour fastball inside. Can't be done. Of course, they can expect that pitch and sit on that pitch and hit that pitch, or they can do what big leaguers do. They can hit it at 70% of their max and wait for the pitcher to come back to that happy zone. And they always do.
Yeah, man, the amount of great information there. So for the people that are listening who may not be familiar with you and your work on the EV, effective velocity, can you talk a little bit about what that is and why it's important to understand?
Well, on the most basic level, a fastball at 90 miles an hour is really only 90 miles an hour. It's hard to explain because it's a very complex thing, but on the core level, it's really simple. Everywhere I throw that 70 mile an hour batting practice pitch that we talked about before, when I throw it, let's just stay with that for a second. If I throw 70 right down the middle, then whatever the radar gun says it is, that's what it is to the hitter. It's 70 miles an hour of speed. And because the hitter's world is in the middle, right? They practice in the middle. They put the tee in the middle. They hit the ball up the middle in the batting cage. Everything is about the middle. Everything's about middle. And so when you see the ball in the middle, that's the one that they're kind of geared to. They're actually late to that, but they're only a little bit late. They're geared to the outside fastball speed because for 100 years we've been taught that the best pitch to throw is an outside fastball. And so when they hit a pitch at 90, in their mind, they're not really hitting 90. In their mind they are, but in reality they're hitting 87 It's always about 2 or 3 miles an hour later than they think. And that's why even in the middle, they're actually late on a ball that's right in the middle. Brent Strom, I've done a lot of work with Brent, and he made the comment one time and actually got in trouble. But the middle is actually way better pitch than middle away by a lot, because it's 2.5 miles an hour faster than the version of that same pitch on the outside part of the plate. So speed is really relative. It changes because the hitter's reach changes. So if we go back to our tee analogy, and I put the tee in the middle, and you throw a pitch at 90 miles an hour right down the middle, then I'm going to time that up. I'll be a tiny bit late, but eventually I'll time that pitch up pretty good. But now you move the ball to the inside part of the plate, right? Just 6 inches. So it goes from middle to inside. Well, the bat is making a circle, right? So if I continue that circle out to the place where I'm going to be at maximum swing efficiency, it's actually 18 inches further out in front that I'm going to make contact. It's not like right next to it. It's not 6 inches away. It's 18 inches away, because where I have to reach in order to make contact. So 90 miles an hour middle in is really 92.5, because now I have to hit it as though it was a 92.5 mile an hour fastball because of where it's at. That's a hard concept, but you know that when you get on a plane, they always tell you exactly when you're going to land, right? Because they know we're taking off from LAX. We're going to be traveling at this distance. We're going to be going this miles an hour. We know the wind's in our face, so we'll adjust for that. But then they put in the most crucial piece of information to be able to tell you when that plane's going to land. And that is, where's the landing spot? Well, in baseball, you don't have a landing spot. You go up to the plate, and there's 150 places within 6 inches of the strike zone that the hitter can reach. In other words, if you could throw a fastball within the hitter's reach and you didn't have very much command, there's 150 different places that ball could go within the strike zone and within a 6 inch area around the strike zone. I mean, that's a lot, right? That's a lot of area. And every one of those places that you throw the ball, it actually has a different speed, a different landing time, because the hitter has to swing a bat that takes him 0.13 seconds, 0.15 seconds with some players. It takes 1/3 of the flight to swing the bat. So before the plane lands, they actually have to start swinging the bat in a place where they think it's going to be. And so that's why it's so weird and hard to explain, but it's really kind of easy if you think about it. A fastball away, you have more time. And the same fastball in, you have less time. And that's really what the core essence of effective velocity is on that smallest level, is, you know, the ABCs of EV is that its speed is location adjusted. You have to adjust the speed based on the location because the time changes.
Yeah. So as a hitter, I tell you what, I'm gonna give you two questions. So as a hitter, why is it important for me to understand that? And then the second one, as a pitcher, why is it important for me to understand that?
Well, it's less important for the hitter to, well, I shouldn't say that. If they don't understand it, then they're bound to repeat the same timing mistakes over and over and over and over and over. How many times have you heard the announcer go, "Oh, he fouled that straight back. He's right on that." 20 times a night, right? And they're actually wrong every time they say that, because the hitter is, in every major league swing, the barrel goes down below the pitch line, and then it makes its way back up to the pitch line. If you watch the arc of the swing, they're all upward, basically, to some degree. And they all go below the pitch line, and then they make their way back up to the pitch line. So if they were actually on time, or they were really close to being on the pitch, like they tell us, then they would foul it off half the time below. In other words, when the pitch comes, when the bat goes up through the pitch line and I'm early, I catch the top of it when I foul tip it. And when I'm late, I catch the bottom of it and foul it straight back. Well, about 99.9% of the foul balls that happen at home plate happen straight back, meaning they're always late. They're always about 2.5 miles an hour late, and they don't know it. And so that's why they don't adjust, is because they don't know that they're late. They think that they're on time for that. And so that's why it's important for hitters to understand it, is because speed is lying to you all the time. And if you go up to the plate expecting speeds to be the way they look against EV pitching, you have no chance. And that's what you're starting to see. There was a lot of good effective velocity examples in this year's postseason. The Brewers, Derek Johnson has been a long time EV follower. Brent Strom is a long time EV follower. Jim Hickey, who was with the Cubs, was one of the original guys that I introduced EV to in 2005 when he was with the Astros. Andrew Friedman was with the Rays when I worked with Carlos Pena, and he also was with Jim Hickey with the Rays. And so the Dodgers front office understands effective velocity to some degree. And so everybody in the playoffs, literally, the one thing that they all had in common was they had an effective velocity education to some degree or another. And so if you don't understand speed as a hitter, you're bound to make the same mistakes over and over and over and over. And it's really difficult to find out what's wrong, because that's how this whole thing started, right? It's a measurement. EV is a measurement of timing at the core. And it's also a measurement of deception for pitchers. And so if for pitchers to understand what EV means, it's night and day. The first guy I worked with was Barry Zito in 2005. And he threw 87, right? 88. And so 2 or 3 miles an hour added is a huge deal. So if you go back and look at film of him, you'll see him elevate fastballs a lot back in the day when you lived at the bottom of the strike zone, because that's what everybody told you was the only safe haven. It's actually very wrong. That's the highest exit velocities down there. They're the lowest. Yeah, there's about 20 reasons why the fastball at the bottom of the strike zone is a terrible idea. But that's the way we lived for a long time. We lived under that myth. But Zito was living at the top of the zone, and because it hid his changeup and it hid his slider and it hid his curveball in the dirt. And so he learned EV tunnels in 2005 and dominated for that season. He was unbelievable at 87, 88. You know, he could touch 90 at times, but for the most part, he lived at 87, 88. But 88 up and in is about 92, 93. And now all of a sudden, 93 with a 80 mile an hour changeup, though, that's a huge speed differential. And so his hard hit ball rate was ridiculously low, because it's just too hard when you don't have any, when the pitch is coming out of the same chute, it looks the same, but there's a 20 mile an hour difference. Forget about it. It takes too long to swing the bat. There's no time to adjust without making big adjustments in my swing, and that costs me exit velocity. So the one thing that pitchers, I'm sorry, go ahead. The one thing pitchers can control is exit velocity. They can't really control all that much about what the hitter does. I don't know what the hitter's thinking really, but I do know after testing for 20 years and observing for another 15, I know what hitters are expecting. I know what they're thinking. I know what they're prepared to hit. And so with that thought process of what knowing what the hitter does, it's actually really easy for pitchers to miss bats, but they choose to do the opposite. They choose to throw pitches right towards that tee instead of completely away from that tee. So if you could imagine that tee, right? standing there again, and I'm a pitcher, and I've got 4 pitches that look like they're going right at that tee. Only one of them goes up and in instead at 100 effective velocity. So it like a Craig Kimbrell fastball. To a right-handed batter, that fastball looks like it's on the outer third when he lets go of it, but it ends up all the way up and in. In other words, it looks like it's going right to that tee, but instead it goes up and in way faster than I'm ready to hit. So their mind is at 95 away, but the ball is at 100 in. And so now the next pitch is that slider that looks like it's going right at the tee, and then it's gone in the other batter's box. So that's what a hitter's up against, is that they get fooled because they're expecting the ball to be going towards that tee where they're ready to hit. And the pitches that look like they're going there and don't, and they have 6 miles an hour, that's only 10%. That makes up for 10% of the hard hit balls that happen. That's it. That means 90% of all hard hit balls are happening as a result of pitcher error, pitcher bad strategy.
I'm Geoff Rottmayer, and thank you for listening to our conversation on the Baseball Awakening podcast. Stay tuned for part 2 of our conversation with Mr. Perry Husband tomorrow.